Are you surprised African leaders are quiet or silent in supporting Captain Ibrahim Traoré? Don't be, because Ghana AI News is here to expose the truth they don't want you to know. Behind their silence is not diplomacy, it is fear. It is submission, it is cowardice wrapped in designer suits, sponsored by the same colonial empires that once looted Africa in broad daylight. Today, they loot through debt, control through aid, and silence through influence. But the betrayal runs even deeper. In this report, we reveal how the former president of Ghana himself, Nana Akufo-Addo, allegedly warned Western powers about Traoré, labeling him a threat to regional stability, simply because the young captain dared to do what others wouldn't: reclaim Africa's sovereignty. Why would an African leader report a fellow African revolutionary to foreign powers? Because when you are loyal to your donors more than your people, liberation becomes dangerous, and truth becomes treason. Stay tuned as we unravel the silence, expose the puppet strings, and shine a light on the youth-led revolution shaking the foundations of neo-colonial Africa. Like, share, and subscribe. Because this is not just news. This is a war cry for the future of our continent. In times of revolution, it is not only the enemies who grow silent, it is the friends, the brothers, the neighbors, the ones who clap loudest in public but disappear when the battle trumpet sounds. For when Captain Ibrahim Traoré stood up, young, unbought, unapologetic, and declared that Burkina Faso would no longer be a servant to the West, the African masses rejoiced. The poor rejoiced. The farmers, the students, the foot soldiers of hope, they rejoiced. But the leaders grew silent. Those who preach Pan-Africanism every Independence Day, those who quote Sankara at AU summits, suddenly they had no words. Suddenly, their tongues forgot the language of solidarity. Why? Because Traoré didn't wait for permission to rise, and in his boldness, he revealed their cowardice. Because he expelled French troops and reclaimed the dignity of Burkina Faso's military decisions, while others still offer their land as staging grounds for foreign bases. Because he repossessed gold mines that had bled the land dry, placing them under national control, while others signed contracts that enrich multinationals and starve their own people. Because he championed self-sufficiency in agriculture, trade and education, while others still beg for imported rice and foreign curricula. Traoré acted, they calculated, they watched from afar, not with admiration, but with apprehension. Not because they disagree, but because they are forbidden to agree. Their every gesture is monitored by Western intelligence. Their budgets depend on donor approval. Their next election may hinge on how compliant they appear to those who watch Africa like a hawk from distant capitals. So they say nothing. They do nothing, because to say his name with honor would be to place their own positions at risk. And yet, how loud that silence screams. It screams betrayal. It screams fear. It screams complicity in a system that has robbed Africa for generations. But what they forget is this. While they remain silent, the people are not. The youth are singing. The women are rising. The streets are whispering his name with reverence. The fire Traoré lit can no longer be extinguished. And the silence of our leaders is only fueling the storm. Africa is not poor. Africa is plundered. And the ones aiding in the plunder wear African names, hold African passports, and wave African flags. But they are not free men. They are not builders of nations. They are caretakers of a colonial structure wearing the disguise of democracy. The bitter truth? Most African presidents are not elected. They are selected. Selected by algorithms of control, by foreign embassies, international corporations, and shadowy financial networks that decide who gets the microphone and who gets muted. The ballot boxes are real, but the power behind them is outsourced. These men are not kings of the people. They are clerks of empire. They speak of sovereignty, but their currencies are pegged. They preach independence, but their budgets are approved by foreign consultants. They wear agbadas and kaftans, but their minds are dressed in Western suits. And while their people suffer in poverty, they smile in foreign conferences, begging for aid, applauding handouts, and signing deals that bury the next generation in debt. Then came Captain Traoré. He broke the chain. He refused IMF loans. He rejected foreign troops. He seized back the wealth of the land. He declared, "We will feed ourselves. We will teach our own. We will fight our own battles." He exposed the farce. Because if one young captain can do all this without begging for aid, then what excuse do the others have? Suddenly, the stage they've performed on for decades, the stage of democratic illusion, of colonial compromise, begins to crack. And when illusions crack, truths come spilling out. Truths like, you don't need France to protect your borders. You don't need the World Bank to educate your children. You don't need imported leadership manuals to love your country. You just need courage. And that is what they fear most. Because Traoré is not just leading a country, he is leading a rebellion against the myth of African dependency. And if the people follow him, if they believe that freedom is possible without foreign chains, they will rise. And when they rise, the puppets will fall. So they don't cheer him, they fear him, they slander him. They distance themselves from him, not because he is a villain, but because he is a mirror. And when they look at him, they see what they were too afraid to become. And no man can love the mirror that exposes his shame. The rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is slave to the lender. Proverbs 22:7. It was written thousands of years ago, but it may as well have been written for modern Africa. Because today, we are not just enslaved by chains, we are enslaved by contracts, by loans, by interest rates, by debts that come with elegant names, development assistance, structural adjustments, public-private partnerships. But do not be deceived. These are not gifts, they are weapons. They are tools of quiet conquest, used not with armies, but with accountants, not with bombs, but with budget ceilings. Every road you see, built with debt. Every airport ribbon you watch them cut, bought with interest. Every foreign-funded hospital, tied to supply contracts, maintenance deals, and foreign pharmaceuticals. Even our dreams are financed and monitored. And in this reality, African presidents do not lead, they manage liabilities. Their true title is not His Excellency, it is Debt Officer-in-Chief. That is the tragedy. And that is why Ibrahim Traoré is so dangerous. Because he said, no more. He said, we will mine our gold. We will plant our own food. We will reclaim our dignity. And with that declaration, he exposed every other leader still bowing before the IMF and the World Bank. He exposed the lie that says we must borrow to breathe. He exposed the spiritual poverty of leaders who govern in fear, fear of default, fear of sanctions, fear of losing the foreign money that keeps their regimes afloat. But here is the divine truth. Fear cannot build a nation. Fear cannot liberate a people. Fear only breeds obedience, and obedience to foreign rule is slavery, no matter how pretty the palace. So when Traoré stood up and said, we will no longer live on our knees, he did not just confront economic dependency. He confronted spiritual cowardice. He declared war, not on the West, but on the mindset that says we are not enough. And for that, they hate him, because his freedom exposes their bondage, because his courage unmasks their compromise, because his fire threatens to consume the paper houses they've built on borrowed sand. And once a people realize they are chained, they will fight to be free. We danced in the streets when the colonial flags came down. We sang new anthems. We held parades. We renamed roads after our heroes. We declared independence. But somewhere deep in the soil, the chains remained. Because while the governors left, the system stayed. It changed its name. It wore African faces, but it remained colonial at its core. What exactly did we decolonize? When the CFA franc is still printed in Paris, when Ghana's gold is still shipped to London while our children learn under leaking roofs, when Nigeria's oil is still priced in Houston while the people of the Niger Delta drink poisoned water, when Chinese companies build our ports, railways and power grids, then take ownership when we default on their hidden clauses. When the face of the oppressor changes color, but the oppression stays the same. What exactly did we win? This is not sovereignty, it is substitution. We traded one master for many. They no longer use whips, they use documents, they no longer ride horses through our villages, they ride private jets into our boardrooms, they no longer insult us with slurs. They flatter us with grants and bind us with debt. And worst of all, our own leaders enforce this system. They sign the contracts. They defend the partnerships. They wear suits tailored in Europe and call it African leadership. They pose for photos beside the same leaders whose countries looted us and call it diplomacy. But Traoré did not play that game. He looked at the map of neo-colonial extraction and he tore it up. He told the French military to leave, not politely but urgently. He exposed secret mining contracts that robbed Burkina Faso of billions. He revoked licenses of exploitative companies that refused to honor fair terms. He declared that the gold of his land would serve his people first, not Paris, not Wall Street, not Beijing. And in doing so, he became the nightmare of the modern empire. Not because he launched missiles, but because he launched memory. He reminded Africans of what it means to say no. And perhaps his most radical act? He inspired Africans to believe that we don't need to be owned to prosper, that we don't need to trade dignity for infrastructure, that we don't need to speak the language of empire to reclaim the soul of our nations. And that is why the West calls him a threat. But Traoré is not the threat. The real threat is the truth. Because once a people realize that their independence was a performance, they stop applauding. They start demanding. And once truth wakes a people from a colonial slumber, no flag, no anthem, no summit can put them back to sleep. And the world knows this. That's why they panic. Not because Traoré is rising, but because he is waking us up. The elders may be tired, the elites may be compromised, but the youth are burning with questions. They are no longer satisfied with the slogans. They no longer believe in the ballots that change nothing. They no longer cheer for leaders who travel to France more than they travel to their own villages. They see the betrayal. They feel it in the poverty of their classrooms. They taste it in the hunger of their homes. They witness it in the silence of their leaders, when Traoré speaks and no one answers. And so they have chosen to speak. They wear his image on their chests, not as fashion, but as a statement. They remix his speeches into songs, not for fun, but as anthems of defiance. They chant his name in universities, in ghettos, in rural towns, not because they want a hero, but because they see a mirror of what leadership should be, rooted in sacrifice, not luxury, rooted in truth, not politics, rooted in the people, not donors. And the youth have become his voice, because their presidents have lost theirs. They are writing a new story, one that doesn't wait for permission from Brussels, one that doesn't seek validation from CNN, one that doesn't fear labels like militaristic or authoritarian, one that simply says, Africa must be free. And it is not a story being written in parliaments. It is being written on TikTok, in rap battles, in graffiti, in whispers passed from classroom to street corner to protest. The youth have taken up the mantle. And no matter how loudly the old order tries to silence them, it is too late. They are not just watching now, they are rising. This is the truth that burns in the hearts of many African leaders, but none dare to speak it. To stand beside Ibrahim Traoré would mean to confess something they cannot bear. That democracy, as we have practiced it, has failed us, failed to feed the poor, failed to secure our borders, failed to return our stolen wealth, failed to protect our women, educate our children, or build a continent worthy of its ancestors. For years they held elections with foreign observers, not to empower their citizens, but to impress the donors. They cut ribbons and signed MOUs, not for progress, but for photos. They hosted summits with English and French translators, not for unity, but for spectacle. But the people have remained hungry. And now comes a man who bypasses all the rituals. No election campaign, no billionaire funding, no Western endorsement. Just resolve, just fire, just loyalty to the people. And in 2 years he has done what many could not do in 20. So what does that say? It says that their entire model of leadership, the conferences, the coalitions, the constitutions soaked in colonial ink, may have been a lie. And that is a truth they are too weak to admit. Because if they endorse Traoré, they admit that. Real power does not need permission. True leadership is not granted by the West. It is earned by the people. A government can function without the World Bank whispering its policies. To endorse Traoré is to call out their own bluff, to reveal that their democracy is not democracy, it is theatre. A theatre of ballots without bread, of parliaments without purpose, of freedoms that do not free. So instead they cling to the script. They chant democracy like a spell, hoping it hides the emptiness beneath. They dismiss Traoré as a threat, not because of what he's done, but because of what he proves. That Africa can lead itself. And for men drunk on borrowed power, that is the most terrifying proof of all. Some betrayals are loud, others are whispered in foreign boardrooms. And few are as heartbreaking as this. President Nana Akufo-Addo, once a symbol of hope, once hailed for his eloquence and vision, chose not to stand with his brother in the Pan-African struggle. He stood with Washington. He warned American officials about Traoré, reportedly labeling him a destabilizing force, accusing him of leaning toward China and Russia, and urging swift intervention before other countries follow.
Today, Russian mercenaries are on our northern border. Burkina Faso has now entered into an arrangement to go along with Mali in employing the Wagner forces there. I believe a mine in southern Burkina has been allocated to them as a form of payment for their services. Prime Minister of Burkina Faso in the last 10 days has been in Moscow. And to have them operating on our northern border is particularly distressing for us in Ghana. Apart from not accepting the idea of great powers once again making Africa their theater of operation, we have a particular position that you know about over the Ukraine war, where we have been very, very vocal and upfront about condemning the invasion of Russia by Russia. And therefore, then now to have this group at our borders is a matter of some considerable disquiet and concern for us. We really like to have a privileged opportunity to talk about its implications and what we believe ought to be the case. This is what took place with the discussion in the Congress yesterday, which I found very fruitful.
Not to African leaders, not to the African Union, but to a superpower with a long history of undermining African sovereignty. It was more than politics. It was betrayal. Betrayal of Pan-African unity. Betrayal of the youth who looked to him as a father figure. Betrayal of the spirit of Nkrumah, who would have wept at the sight of Ghana, warning the empire about Burkina Faso's freedom. Rather than defend a fellow African leader being targeted by foreign propaganda, Akufo-Addo chose to become a messenger of the West, a servant reporting to his master. And with that one act, he revealed the answer to a question many had been asking: where does his loyalty lie? And it wasn't with the people. I do not write this with rage alone. I write this with grief, with trembling fingers and a heart heavy with the weight of history. Because what we are witnessing is not new. It is a familiar betrayal, one our ancestors knew too well, one written in blood across the pages of African history. When Patrice Lumumba rose for the Congo, they silenced him, not just with bullets, but with betrayal from within. When Thomas Sankara dared to dream of a Burkina Faso that stood tall, he was cut down by those closest to him. When Muammar Gaddafi defied the West and tried to unite Africa economically, militarily, spiritually, he was branded a madman and murdered in daylight while African heads of state watched and said nothing. Africa does not bury its enemies. Africa buries its revolutionaries, and today, that cycle threatens to repeat. But something is different this time. The world has changed. The youth have phones. The truth has wings. The betrayal is no longer hidden. It is recorded, reposted, replayed. Screenshots are now our scrolls. Videos are our witnesses. The silence is being archived. The cowardice is being bookmarked. The betrayal is being remembered. The people are watching. The youth know who stood with the empire and who stood with the people. They will not forget who spoke and who stayed quiet when the fire was rising. Because memory is the fuel of justice, and the youth are lighting the match. To every African president still hiding in silence, still hoping this storm will pass you by, listen, your time is not eternal. You will not rule forever. One day your portrait will hang in a dusty corridor, your name will be written in a textbook or erased from it, and the people will ask, where were you when Ibrahim Traoré stood alone? Where were you when Burkina Faso reclaimed her dignity? Where were you when Africa had a chance to shatter the last chains of colonization? And what will your answer be? Will you say, I was afraid? Afraid of Washington's disapproval? Afraid of losing donor funding? Afraid of sanctions from the same empires that enslaved your ancestors? Will you say, I didn't want to offend the West? If so, then history will not call you wise. It will call you a coward. It will call you a traitor in a time that demanded bravery. You were not called to be caretakers of foreign interests. You were called to be guardians of the African soul. But many of you chose comfort over courage. And so I ask you now, not with accusation but with urgency, where do you stand? Because neutrality is no longer an option. In this battle for Africa's soul, silence is betrayal. And the youth, your own children, are watching you. Choose wisely. Despite all the silence, all the betrayal, all the colonial puppetry, Africa is moving. And she is not moving through policies written in Western think tanks. She is not moving through elections monitored by foreign observers. She is not moving through empty speeches delivered in air-conditioned halls. No, Africa is moving through hearts, through the awakened minds of her children, through the restless questions of her youth, through the righteous anger of the poor, the ignored, the forgotten. Africa is rising, not with permission but with purpose. The wind has shifted, and it is no longer blowing toward Paris or Washington. It is blowing inward, toward Accra, toward Bamako, toward Ouagadougou, toward the soul of the continent. Let the stories of the cowards be recorded. Let the voices of the brave be amplified, and let every African youth know you are not alone. Your voice is a drum in a growing chorus, a thunder of resistance, a song of dignity, a march toward freedom. Support Traoré not because he is perfect, but because he is necessary. Because in a sea of silence, he is a voice. Because in a land of chained leaders, he walks free. Because in a continent of compromise, he chose conviction. He is not the answer to all our problems, but he is proof that the answer still exists. He is proof that Africa can still produce sons who kneel to no empire. He is a flame, and now it is up to us to fan it. As Proverbs 29 verse 2 says, "When the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. But when the wicked rule, the people groan." Africa has groaned long enough. It is time to rejoice. And to every young person watching this, you are the author of the next chapter. Do not wait for politicians. Do not ask for permission. Rise, speak, building, lead. The dawn is not coming. It is here. If you believe in this message, like, share, and subscribe to Ghana AI News. Let our stories be told, not in whispers, but in thunder. Let our truth travel not in footnotes, but in fire. And to the leaders still kneeling to foreign masters, the youth are watching, and history is being written. Whether you stand or not, Africa is moving forward. At Ghana AI News, we are not here to protect the powerful. We are here to amplify the unheard, expose betrayal, and stand with the people. If you're tired of sugar-coated headlines, if you're ready for fearless reporting rooted in Pan-African truth, if you believe the time has come for Africa to speak with its own voice, then subscribe to Ghana AI News now. Because this is not just a channel, it is a movement. And we are just getting started. Like, share, subscribe. The revolution will not be televised, but it will be reported right here.